This is the Charles Adler Tonight podcast.
On the federal side, we have strongly discouraged non-essential international travel, including by imposing mandatory quarantines for anyone returning to Canada, and now mandatory testing for anyone before they get on a plane to come back to Canada. These are measures that are limiting, as we're seeing the airlines reduce their flights because people are understanding that they are not supposed to travel right now.
You're not supposed to travel right now. It seems like a pretty commonsensical position. It's not the first we've heard of this. As I mentioned before the break, epidemiology and the experts whose lives have been rooted in that brand of science have really been thrust into a white-hot spotlight over the last 10 months. We've reached the point where simple fact sharing results in anonymous hate mail or worse. I saw a tweet from our next guest, Raywat Deonandan, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Health and Sciences at the University of Ottawa, an epidemiologist who has found out that simply saying, you know what, you shouldn't travel, can land you in a really mucky social media soup. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
No problem.
So, Raywat, tell me what happened. I read the story that the CBC quoted you in, and it didn't seem like that big of a deal. And yet, wow.
Well, you have to understand, this is not the first time. This has been constant for the last 9 months. It's not just me. It's pretty much any scientist speaking in public about the pandemic on the side of controlling the pandemic gets a ton of hate mail. And it's never rational hate mail, and they go for the lowest hanging fruit. For me, it's my skin color because I'm not white. For the women, it's their gender. The more prominent scientists are threatened with legal action and things like that. And it's really weird. And I think part of it is by they I mean the people who do this, misperceive what your role is. We don't make policy. No. Hate somebody, hate the government is making the policy. And they see a face on the TV and they can look you up online and find your email address and get at you that way. So I think there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of pain out there, and a lot of people who don't know how to process it, and their only reaction is anger and conflict. And so they lash out. So it's not pleasant, but I try to rationalize it that way.
Well, I loved you right away because I saw your banner on your Twitter that is Star Trek with like Dr. Spock wearing a mask. I'm like, we could hang out. It's just remarkable, though, in just reading through your Twitter feed. I mean, that you continue to do this, that you even said yes to doing this on your Friday night. You're in Ontario, right? So 11 o'clock.
It's 11 o'clock, and the baby's just asleep, and I'm covered in baby vomit, so it's I'm hiding in the basement away from the nursery. 8 months, pandemic baby.
Congratulations. And so you don't have enough going on is basically what you're telling me. Between epidemiology and, oh no.
Yeah, so the scientists who do public commentary don't get paid for this. People need to understand that we do this because it's our civic duty. I'm not a COVID researcher. I'm not even an infectious disease epidemiologist. I'm a global health epidemiologist. A lot of the physicians who comment on this aren't necessarily frontline COVID workers, but they have the ability, the eloquence, the wherewithal to put words together. And what I find, though, is a lot of the triggering word for a lot of people is selfishness. Yeah. So I can pretty much predict when I'm going to get a wave of hate tweets and hate mail if I use that word in any capacity. For example, an anti-mask demonstration, I'd say, well, some people are being selfish. Guaranteed a wave of hate mail. And I think for this particular story, I was very careful in how I phrased it. I said, it isn't always about selfishness when you go to travel. Sometimes you have to visit a sick loved one and so forth. But, there is going to be a category, a contingent of people for whom it actually is selfish. And that was a triggering word. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And I'm a talk show host. I'm paid to have an opinion. I write a weekly column in the orca.ca, which is, an online local journalist platform in British Columbia. And I wrote a column, I'm going to say 2 months ago, where I coined the phrase loopholer, because I was trying to find a different way of saying selfish people. right? And I wanted to say selfish, wealthy people, because people who are stringing together paycheck to paycheck or laid off and no longer have a way to even get the necessities or essentials, the people that are saying, well, I pay my property tax up at the cottage, so I'm going to go even though we're all supposed to stay home. It's like that is a loopholer, because that's it
right.
kind of pulls back the selfish piece, because they don't want to be called entitled or selfish, which I can say as an opinionated talk show host, they are for doing that. Because if we all stayed still, one of your most recent tweets is I'm paraphrasing, but basically every case of COVID-19 can be traced back to travel.
That's right. It's astonishing, isn't it, if you think of it that way? It didn't just arise here spontaneously. Somebody brought it here, and it spread from there. And to bring it back to epidemiology, the real pressing reason that we really have to control travel right now, if you don't buy the fact that travel constitutes a significant portion of transmission, and many people don't buy that, is we are in a race against time against the new variants that might overwhelm our system if they become the dominant kind of COVID in our country. So we have to contain it where it is right now to buy us time to vaccinate everybody. So we have to stay put while that happens.
We do indeed. Do you mind taking some phone calls if we open up the phone lines in our next segment?
Sure. Let's do it.
Or have you absolutely had it with everybody? No, I'm kidding. You are so kind to be here. I really appreciate it. So we will line up. If you want some facts from an epidemiologist who has been on top of what we are experiencing on a global level, 1-877-399-9898 is the number. 1-877-399-9898 is the number to call, and we'll get to your calls in this next segment. What you were just touching on there is really, I think, super important in terms of when people look at the vaccines that we have, the Moderna or the Pfizer BioNTech that is, the two approved ones, or the others that we hopefully are going to see coming down the pipeline, that we're getting these promises from our leaders that by, the end of September, every Canadian will have had the opportunity, if they want a vaccine, they will have it. In order to get to that finish line, that ray of hope at the end, that we can even make the statement that we might have some semblance of normalcy this fall of 2021. What do we really need to do? What have we perhaps lost sight of as we're watching the numbers escalate in Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta, and so on?
We've lost sight of a number of things. One is we still have a disease to deal with. The vaccine is our salvation, but it's not thoroughly and fully here yet. So we have to walk through the gates of hell, as Larry Brilliant, another epidemiologist, put it recently, before the vaccine does its job. So we have to do our jobs in the meantime. Second of all is the threat of mutation is getting a little scary. At first, I didn't take it that seriously, to be honest, because this virus actually does not mutate as quickly as things like the influenza virus. But the kinds of mutations we're seeing might be such that it poses a large threat. For example, the UK variant is so infectious that it's not more lethal, but it can infect so many more people that the same percentage getting sick will overrun our hospitals much faster. The South African variant might be more resistant to our immune systems. The Brazilian variant might be resistant to the vaccine. So that stuff makes it very, very scary and dire. So we have to move fast. And the different formulations of vaccines available to us give us a variety of options in terms of which populations can tolerate which formulations and which regions we can ship it to most easily. So the things we have to do, of course, is get the vaccines into the right arms as quickly as we can. And I said that specifically because any jab in any arm is a win, but a jab in the right arm is a bigger win. By which I mean, if we get it into the most vulnerable, we can reduce the risk greater. So that's what I was just going to say.
In terms of those who are most at risk and those around them to be a firewall, right? I mean, that's the piece of this puzzle. I got the call last Saturday evening, late. I'm the essential care for my dad, who is late Alzheimer's in a long-term care home, and they called me. I thought something had happened to Dad, and they said, we're calling for consent. And I'm like, absolutely, give him the shot. And they said, no, actually, we're wondering if you would consent to having the shot as his essential care. And I was shocked by that, because I was thinking I'm July or August before I'm going to have this. And then it was like, okay, I kind of feel like maybe I feel guilty. And it took me some time, right? Like there's this sort of societal piece to this.
Sure.
And that get the shots in the arms. Like, let's stop fighting over each other and getting mad at the epidemiologist on social media, and focus on how do we protect people until the shots get in everybody's arm?
Yeah, and remember, there is an epidemic of dying happening amongst the elderly, and people have lost sight of that, or they don't care. There's a word for that. It's genocide, the killing of our elderly, and we are a genocidal civilization in many ways.
Thanks for listening to the Charles Adler Tonight podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review for free on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. And join the conversation. You can reach me on Twitter @Charles Adler or by email at charles@adlertonight.ca, charles@adlertonight.ca. Talk to you next time.
Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, I wonder where you're at.
Landing on Showcase January 17th.
The city needs a hero.
Get ready
It needs a Batwoman.
for a whole
I met the new girl.
new